Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people get exactly what they ask for. And in today's episode, smug Karens, idiots on trains, grandparents are all getting taught lessons they won't forget. And one OP tells a story about the time they encounter a homeless person, and the story is just so freaking wholesome. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I thought about this recently, and I thought you'd enjoy this story. I used to work on the railway as a guard, so my job involves checking and selling tickets, giving people travel information and advice, and most importantly, keeping them safe and looking after them if there's an emergency. Sometimes, this means telling them off if they've got their feet on the seats as well. That said, I was working a train down from London one afternoon. I was checking tickets and trying to be helpful when I come across a gentleman in an otherwise empty coach who had his feet on the seats and massive noise-canceling headphones on his head. I asked if I could see his ticket and if he'd be so kind as to remove his feet, but of course, the guy couldn't hear me. I asked again slightly louder, and again he ignored me. I then took my carriage key and I used it to tap the window, creating a loud and clear knocking sound that normally cuts through headphones and sleep alike. But even this did nothing. So the final resort is I took a firm grasp on the back of his seat and gave it a shake. This was enough to get the guy's attention, and I say to him, "Good afternoon, tickets please, and would you mind keeping your feet off the seats?" At this, the guy loses it and he says, "Who the F do you think you are? What gives you the right to disturb me?" So I let him know, "Well sir, it's my job to check your tickets, so if you'd be so good as to show me yours, I'd be happy to leave you alone, but I still need you to take your feet off the seats." At that, the guy responds, "Oh, F off," while getting out his ticket. He then says to me, "I don't want to be disturbed again, do you understand?" I reply, "Absolutely sir, but please take your feet off the seats. Or, how about we put newspaper down first? Or, you could take off your shoes, perhaps." Grumbling, the guy finds an old newspaper and he spreads it out on the seat opposite, before placing his feet back up. I then say to him, "Also, sir, it might be a good idea to turn your headphones down a tad. Otherwise, you might not hear important announcements." The guy then says to me, "I've made it quite clear that I don't want to talk to you. Now F off." Now, one of the key skills in my job is knowing when to pick your battles, and I had no desire to make more work for myself by dealing with this guy. So off I F'd. A few minutes later, I had a call from control, letting me know that due to a signaling issue further down the line, my train was going to be diverted just after our next stop. As a result, we would be missing 90% of the stations that we had been due to stop at, and we'd be running directly to our final destination. So I call up my driver and I let him know about the change in plan, and then I make an announcement to my passengers. I say, "Good afternoon, everyone. This is your guard speaking. I've just received word from control that due to a signaling issue at Station B, this train will now be diverted between Station A and Station G, and will no longer be stopping at Station B, Station C, Station D, Station E, and Station F. We'll instead be running fast, directly to Station G. Any passengers for Stations B, C, D, E, or F should change at Station A. If you have any questions, I'll be walking through the train, so please do not hesitate to ask. Thank you." And so I walked through the train, talking to the passengers and making sure they all understood what was going on, and where they would now need to change in order to get to where they were going. Some of them were annoyed, but I did my best to explain it to them and let them know that it was beyond our control. By the time I'd walked through the whole train, every single passenger knew exactly what they needed to know. Well, all the passengers but one. We arrive at Station A, and quite a lot of people got off. I had an 8-coach train, and now only about 20 or so passengers were left, so it was nice and quiet. I then made one last announcement about the diversion, and then shut the doors and gave the driver on the bell the signal that we were ready to start. I happened to be on the same coach as the gentleman from earlier, who now had his eyes open and he was looking out the window. I watched him as he watched the world slide by as we pulled out of the station, and I watched him as he felt us bounce over a set of points that we would not normally have crossed over. I watched him as he began to realize that the view out of the window was wrong, and that we had gone down a different line than usual. The guy's face started to change as we started to zip past stations that he had clearly never seen before, as we took the diversion down to Station G. After a few minutes, he walked up to where I was in my guard's office, and he asked me what time we were due to arrive at Station B. I said to him, well, like I said in the announcements, we're not going to Station B anymore. We're running non-stop to Station G. I made plenty of announcements about it. The guy then says to me, well, I didn't hear anything. Why didn't you tell me? To which I respond, you made it perfectly clear that you didn't want me to disturb you, sir, and I had warned you about being able to hear the announcements. He then screams at me and says, well, I need to get to Station B. How am I going to get there now? And this was perfect. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I then explained to him that he was now going to have to stay on this train until we got to Station G, and then wait around for half an hour or so to get another train from Station G to Station A, wait some more, and then get a bus from Station A to Station B. The guy then asked, how long's that going to take? I respond, well, from Station A to Station G along the diversion, it's about an hour and a half each way, plus the waiting. That's if the buses are good. If they're running on time, it should take about 4 hours or so, give or take. Well, needless to say, the guy wasn't happy about this, but there was nothing I was able to do to help him out. And after all, the guy made it clear many times that he didn't want me to disturb him. Well, can't say the guy didn't get exactly what he asked for, right? And well frickin' played by OP. I just want to know how OP kept from bursting into laughter when that guy was losing it at the fact that he missed his stop. He only has himself to blame in the end, as it cost absolutely nothing to be nice. And this person comments, as an ex-ticket inspector for the railway, I can confirm that passengers like this are common, and it's a glorious feeling when their vile attitude ends up biting them in the face. I once had some upper-class types traveling in first class without first-class tickets, and they refused to move or pay to upgrade their standard tickets. After a bit of an argument, I stated that the train would not be moving from the next station with them still on it, and they would have to find an alternative train into London. They scoffed at that idea, and they told me I couldn't make them do anything, and that I should just F off. Anyways, I called for police assistance at the next station, which just happened to be at Gatwick Airport, and waiting on the platform as we arrived were 4 armed officers. The look on these people's faces when they realized the police were there for them and they would be getting off was priceless. Further to that, they were all sent to court for their fare evasion, and I'm not sure what the exact fine was, but it would have been several £100s and a criminal record. That's my fondest memory from my time as on-board staff. There was also a time when I was a revenue officer, and I was issuing a penalty fare to someone who sat in first class without a ticket, who was absolutely furious at me, and the guy ends up spitting in my face. Unfortunately for him, I noticed a Colas rail ID in his wallet. Long story short, he was prosecuted and he lost his job. I do love working on the railway. See, why do people not know that a lot of the times, you'll have a much more pleasant experience when you treat employees with decency and respect? Again, it costs absolutely nothing to be nice and cooperative, right? And guys, in this next story, a grandpa gets taught a lesson he doesn't ever forget. So I was hanging out, having a laugh with my grandma when this old story came up. It's pretty mild, but it still brings a smile to my face. To preface, I'm allergic, or at the very least, very intolerant to beans. When I was a toddler, my mom tried to feed me beans a few times, and within 5 minutes, I would projectile vomit right across the kitchen floor. She put 2 and 2 together, and after that, no more beans for little 2-year-old me. So jump forward a few years. I was around 8 years old, visiting my grandparents for winter break. I loved hanging with my grandfather. He he would always bring me neat things like books and logic puzzles for us to play together. That day in particular, he had bought me new velvet pajamas covered in stars and comets. I was super excited to wear them to bed, and I was wearing them at the table when everything went down. So dinner time rolls around, and my grandfather reveals that he made slow roasted beans for us. I immediately tell him and grandmother that I don't eat beans because they make me sick. At that, my grandfather rolls his eyes, and he told me to sit and eat my dinner. Now, to be fair, I was a picky eater, but I would never claim that the food I disliked would make me sick. I would just say, I don't like to eat blah blah blah. Beans were the only thing that I would say made me sick. So I repeat again that I don't eat beans, that my mom never makes me eat them because they make me sick. Grandfather starts getting mad, and he tells me that I either sit at the table until I finish the beans I'd been served, or I can go straight to bed with no dinner and expect to be put on restrictions for the next few days, aka no cartoons or fun movies or games. My grandmother tells him that he should just leave me be, but he's not having it. And this was the only time I've ever felt anything other than pure wholesome love for my grandpa. He and my grandmother finish their dinner and they start to clean up, while I thought about what I should do. On one hand, I could just go to bed, and accept I'd probably have no cartoon time for the next few days. But I was so mad that he didn't believe me that I refused to accept being punished for telling the truth. So I just sat there and I ate the entire effing bowl of beans. I hated the texture, the smell, absolutely everything about what I was eating. But he said to eat them all, so that's exactly what I was going to do. About halfway through, I start feeling strange, but I push through it, swallowing the beans whole and washing it down with as much milk and cornbread as possible. All in all, it probably took me 20 minutes or so to finish the small bowl, but it felt like hours. I finish up, put my bowl in the sink, and softly announce that I'm done with all my food. I remember grandfather patting me on the back and saying, "See, it wasn't so bad, was it?" as we walked down the hall towards the bedrooms. At the very end of the hall was the doorway to his and my grandmother's bedroom, with a bathroom directly across the hall. He then told me to brush my teeth while he changed into his pajamas, and that he would come to my room to tuck me in. I open my mouth to say okay, and all of a sudden, all of my alarms go off. I turn around, so I'm facing the bathroom, and I try to take a few steps to at least make it to the sink. Well, I fail, and I proceed to projectile vomit all over the floor, the vanity, the mirror, and myself. Chunks of beans and cornbread collected at my feet as I coughed up everything I swallowed. My new pajamas were absolutely ruined. I then start to cry as I stood in a pool of the vilest mixture of fluids I've ever seen come out of my body. It was all so sudden and violent that my grandparents couldn't react right away. My grandmother, who had been lying in bed, scooped me up and she started consoling me. I then peeped at my grandfather, who was still standing there horrified at what he saw. And I stammered in the weakest voice I could, "I told you beans make me sick." My grandmother gave him a death glare and told him curtly that since he pushed me to eat the beans, that he could clean up the beans. She helped me shower in their bathroom and calm down. When she finally got me to bed an hour later, my grandfather was still purging the bathroom. The next morning, he apologized to me profusely, and he promised he would never do anything like that again. And as far as I know, not only did he never again force me to eat anything I didn't want, he extended the same policy to the rest of his grandkids. Years later, he said that he could still remember the stench of the bathroom that night, and the disgusting sensation of scooping semi-solid beans from every imaginable surface that is absolutely disgusting. And Gramps totally got more than what he bargained for. I'm just honestly surprised that Mom never said anything about OP's beans intolerance ever, like you'd think, right? And even though that was quite an evil malicious compliance for a small kid to execute, it was actually pretty nice how Grandpa handled the whole thing afterwards. Like, it's one of those rare cases where people actually learned from the malicious compliance. So at the park I work at, we have a bunch of slides, a wave pool, and one regular swimming pool that has these plastic water slides that empty into it that we also use for training. The shallow end's about 3 feet and the deep end is 10, but the water slides empty into the 4 to 5 feet end. And here's the thing, a lot of people underestimate the depth and find themselves having to swim back to the wall instead of standing. I'm only 5'2", so even I have to swim from that slide. Now, because of the depth, we require anyone under 48 inches to wear a life jacket, no matter where they are in the pool, as that's state law. As you can imagine, a lot of parents aren't happy with this. And although we have free life jackets as a courtesy, on very busy days, we do run out. But our biggest issues come from the parents who are convinced their child is the next Olympic athlete. On this particular day, it was fairly busy, and I'd enlisted a couple of my lifeguards to look for life jackets that were left all over instead of hung back up. That's when a little kid comes running to the pool, and I noticed his height. The guy's about 2 inches too short. Poor little guy. So I shout and say, "Hey buddy, I'm so sorry, but you can't swim in this pool without a life jacket." His mom walks up behind him and she says, "Oh, that's all right, he can swim." I respond, "Unfortunately, because of state law, I can't let him in the water without a life jacket." The woman says, "He's on the swim team, he's perfectly fine." I respond, "I'm sorry ma'am, it's not our rule, it's law." The woman rolls her eyes and she huffs off, but manages to find her kid a life jacket. So I take my eyes off them to pay more attention to my zone. Regular irritated parent, no big deal. Fast forward 10 minutes and I see this kid climb up the slide. It's the same child, so I whistle at him and take him to his mom. And I again say, "Ma'am, I understand he can probably swim, but he can't go down the slide or into the pool without a life jacket." The woman says, "Absolutely not. I'm not putting that death trap back on my child." I respond, "I understand, but..." She then stops me right there and she says, "He can swim perfectly fine. He's on a swim team. He's fine. That life jacket was choking him. I will not have my child choking and dying. Goodbye." At this point, I almost cracked up, but the woman walked off, dragged her kid with her, so I just rolled my eyes and think nothing of it. Every 20 to 30 minutes, we rotate positions as lifeguards to keep our eyes fresh and our energy up. So our lovely entitled mom decides to wait until we rotated to try to bring her child back. Unfortunately for her, I just moved to the other side of the pool. About 10 minutes into the rotation, I notice a distressed swimmer. I can see someone swimming, but clearly struggling and barely moving. The stage before active drowning. So I whistle, jump in, yank the swimmer onto my tube, and lo and behold, it's the same child. And at this point, I'm mad, but not as mad as his mom. The woman sitting in a lounge chair on the side of the pool, not paying attention at all. So I help the kid out and drag him to his mom. I tell the woman, "Ma'am, this is the 3rd time I've tried to talk to you. Your child almost drowned in the pool because he..." She then interrupts me and says, "Did you touch my child?" I say to her, "I rescued your child." She then says to me, "I didn't give you permission to save my child. You had no right to touch him. You should have asked me first before grabbing him like that." I respond, "I didn't see you anywhere. You weren't watching your child. So I had to make a decision." The woman argues and says, "He was swimming fine. How dare you save him just to prove your point? Just admit you're a lifeguard on a power trip. I want to speak to your supervisor." My supervisor comes over and Karen says, "This lifeguard won't let my child swim in the pool. She gave him a life jacket that was choking him and then dragged him out of the pool without my permission. He's on a swim team. If he can swim, he shouldn't have to wear one." Now, sometimes, if the kids are near the correct height, we let them swim if there's no adequate life jackets and if they seem like strong swimmers, and they have a reliable adult with them. So my supervisor decides to extend this privilege to Karen. Karen says, "Thank you. I can't believe it took this long for you to see sense. I hope she gets written up at the very least for ruining my son's day." My supervisor tells her she was doing her job, but I'm sorry it made things difficult for you. The woman goes back to chatting with her friends, and her son runs happily to the slide, where he nearly drowned once already. The kid slides down it, and sure enough, he starts drowning immediately. But I'm not allowed to rescue her son because he can swim. He's on the swim team. He's great. I'm actually about to jump in, and that's when my supervisor stops me. He gets the mom's attention, and he says, "Ma'am, your son is drowning." The woman rolls her eyes, and she walks over to the edge of the pool. She says, "He's not. He's swimming just fine." By this point, the son's moved from distressed swimming to active drowning. His mouth is bobbing up and down over the water, and his eyes are wide. And the kid's arms are desperately grabbing for something, but he's not moving anywhere. At this point, I'm getting antsy. I don't want a kid drowning on my watch, even if I don't have permission from the parent to rescue him. And that's when Karen falls into hysterics, and she screams, "What are you doing? Don't just stand there. Do something. Save him." Despite my now anger, I need no second bidding. I jump in, grab the poor kid a second time, and pull him out of the water. The supervisor tells Karen, "Please put a life jacket on him, or you can take him to the kids area where he can swim wherever he likes without one." The woman didn't even say thank you. She shot me a dirty look, signed the incident report, and hauled her shivering child away. Some parents, I tell you, almost letting her kid drown to prove a point. Like that poor kid, he's in for a lifetime of disasters and near disasters because of his mom's entitlement and idiocy. And guys, it's so scary how often this happens in swimming pools. Like some parents will literally let their kids almost drown with the mentality that they either figure out how to swim or they die. And I'm willing to bet that this Karen was one of those parents. In 2003, I returned home from my first year of college. I had decided to switch schools and degrees and attend a local music college instead. I moved back into my parents' home and drove into the city each day for classes. And in order to save on parking, I purchased a permit to park in a church's parking lot. This lot was about 10 blocks from the school, so I had a decent walk each day. About a week into classes, I was on my walk, smoking a cigarette, when out of nowhere, a homeless man appears right next to me. The guy was in his late 50s, with messy salt and pepper hair, a flannel jacket, snow pants, and work boots with no laces. The guy leans in and says, "Hey buddy, can I get a smoke?" Now, I was 19 at the time, and a bit cocky. I was gonna give him one, but he had to work for it. I told him that he could have one, but he would have to walk with me to class and keep me company while he smoked it. The guy agrees, and off we went. We exchanged names and asked each other basic questions about our lives, the normal pleasantries. 1 block from school, we tossed our butts, and the guy again leans in and says, "Hey buddy, I gotta ask, you got any spare change?" I replied, "I'm sorry, but I don't keep any change on me." At the time, I tossed all my spare change in this giant glass jug I had in my room, so we parted ways that day. I kid you not, 2 weeks later, this man had memorized my class schedule. Every single day, this man would meet me at the corner. He would ask for a smoke and then walk me to class. And every day, the guy would ask for change, and me having none. This continued for the whole school year. So now, it's just a few weeks away from graduation. I'm getting ready in the morning for class. I put on my leather trench coat, grab my book bag, and I head for the front door. That's when I look down at the floor and I can see 2 glass jugs overflowing with change. I look down at the huge pockets in my coat and then back at the change jars. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do it. So I take each milk jar and I turn it upside down into each pocket. And you have no idea how much 2 gallons of change actually weighs. I then head off for school. Things start off like normal. The guy meets me at the corner, I give him a smoke, and we set off. I'm trying my best to step lightly as to not make my pockets jingle, and I can't look him in the face because I don't want to totally lose it. We finally get to the end of our walk and we toss our cigarettes. The guy turns to me and says, "Hey buddy, I gotta ask, do you have any change today?" And that's when I turn to him and say, "Okay, I'm gonna make you a deal. I will give you all the change I have in my pockets if you promise to never ask me for change again. Deal?" He nods his head in agreement and he holds out one hand, palm up. I say to him, No, you don't understand. I said I have a lot of change." So the guy then holds out both hands, cupping them together. I then say, No, you don't understand. I have a lot of change." The guy stands there with a questioning look on his face. So I grab the bottom of his sweatshirt and I pull it up, making him hold it like a hammock. I then proceed to start shoveling handfuls of change into his sweatshirt, handful after handful, and the guy's eyes are getting wider and wider in sheer disbelief. Just when he thinks I'm about finished, I switch to the other pocket, more and more change. The sound is echoing between the buildings, and both of us are laughing uncontrollably. I finally finished, and he thanked me, and the guy waddled off like a pregnant woman as I went to class. The next day was bright and sunny. I park my car at the church, and as I'm walking, I have a huge smile on my face. The guy meets me at the corner, also with a big smile on his face. He then leans in, and with a huge grin, he says, "Hey buddy, can I get a smoke?" There's a long pause, and I respond, "Yeah buddy, you can have a smoke." What a wholesome encounter that was, and what a sweet story. I just hope the kangaroo pouch of change made a difference for him, even if it's just for that day. Again, what a wholesome story, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/petty revenge episode. I haven't done those in a while, where the stories are absolutely hilarious. And OP destroys a man's career, guys. It's such a wild one. So go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.